Good evening, and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, September 11th, 2025. The beginning of this week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Tavo, describes the ceremony of Bikkurim. In Israel, when the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was standing in Jerusalem, there was a mitzvah for farmers to bring Bikkurim. Bikkurim means the first fruits. So this would take place at the beginning of the summer, when the first fruits would appear on the trees or the vines. The farmer would collect a basket of them, and the farmer would take them from his home and take them to Jerusalem. And when he reached Jerusalem, he would go to the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and would go to the Kohen, and he would present his basket of fruits, first fruits, to the Kohen. And this was a very, very joyous ceremony. The Mishnah describes that when they finally reached the outskirts of Jerusalem, all of the people of Jerusalem would come out to meet these farmers. And they would say to them, "Welcome, welcome, you're coming to do such a big mitzvah." And they would stand up and line the streets as they came into Jerusalem. And the farmer would come to the Beit HaMikdash, he would bring the basket to the Kohen, and then he would recite a text. He would recite a text, and the text is recalling a very brief retelling of the history of the Jewish people in just a few sentences. And it starts with the following words: Arami Oved Avi. I'm not going to translate that for now, but you should recognize that that comes from the Pesach Seder, from the Haggadah. It's this text that we quote at the Passover Seder in order to tell the story of the Jewish people and the persecution and the Exodus. Okay, Arami Oved Avi, Vayered Mitzrayma, and Yaakov went down to Egypt, Vayagar Sham Bimsei Ma'at, and he dwelled there, sojourned there in a small group. It was just his family, 70 souls. Vayisham l'goy gadol atzum v'rav, and they became there very great, and they multiplied, and they became a great nation. And it goes on to say, and then the Egyptians persecuted them, and the Jewish people cried out to God, and God heard their prayer, and God took them out of Egypt. So that's the passage. So, and God brought us to the land of Israel, and God has given us this land. And now the farmer says, I am bringing the first fruits from this land that you have given us to thank you, Hashem, for everything that you've done for us. So that's the context of this text. We only quote at the Seder the part that's relevant to Passover. But it starts with these words, Arame Oved Avi. These words are quite ambiguous. Some commentators understand the word Oved as a verb, which means to destroy, to wipe out. And the translation would be an Aramean tried to destroy my forefather. In other words, Lavan, who was an Aramean, please be careful and remember that Aramean is different than Armenian. Armenians are good. They are our friends. Aramean is a whole different group, and they're not so good. So it means that Lavan, who was the father-in-law of Yaakov, tried to stop Yaakov from having a family. He switched the wives. He did all kinds of things to try to interrupt Yaakov's success. So what that means is, what we're saying with that is, from the very beginning of our history, from the time of Yaakov, there have been people that have tried to destroy us. Lavan tried to destroy us, and Paro tried to destroy us, and the Spanish Inquisition tried to destroy us, and Hitler tried to destroy us, and Hamas is trying to destroy us, and none of them will succeed. None of them will succeed. The Cossacks. Also, I left out a few. I don't have time to mention all of them. I'm sorry? Okay. Well, I'm not getting involved in Canadian politics. But so the point is, we are celebrating our immortality. All, like we say at the Seder, all of these enemies have risen up against us, and Hashem protects us. And they're all destroyed, and we're here. We're flourishing. And we're not only flourishing, but we're flourishing in Israel, in our own land, and we are sustained by the bounty of this land. And that's the praise, the thanks that we're saying to Hashem when we bring these first fruits. My colleague and friend and teacher, Rabbi Kenny Brander, quotes another opinion. This is suggested by Ibn Ezra and says that Oved doesn't mean destroy. It is an adjective. It means wandering or nomadic. And what the words mean to say is that my forefather Yaakov was a wanderer. He was never in one place. He did not have a home. And he had problems in his family. And there were arguments in his family. And because of the problems in his family, they ended up in Egypt. You remember, because of the enmity between Yosef and the brothers, that's how they ended up in Egypt. And so the experience of wandering and the instability of Yaakov's family and the strife within his family was the direct cause of becoming slaves in Egypt and the persecution. And then Hashem heard our cry and took us out. So the way it comes out, according to the first opinion, we're talking about external enemies, other nations, other people who have tried to destroy us. According to the second opinion, we're talking about internal strife, internal conflicts, distrust, resentment of one Jew against another. And we know that these sins not only led to the persecution in Egypt, they also led to the destruction of the Second Temple. It was destroyed because of sinas chinam, needless hatred. And Nebuch, we see that these conflicts continue today. There are, to our shame and horror, conflicts between different groups of Jews, especially in Israel, but here also, religious and secular, left and right. And Rabbi Brander says that it is to address that opinion that our rabbis in the Mishnah talk about how important it was that when these farmers would come to Jerusalem, everyone in Jerusalem would greet them joyously. My brother, my sister, welcome, so glad that you're here. And that is part of the mitzvah, because the statement that the farmer is going to make references the internal strife. So we want to demonstrate that right now, Baruch Hashem, we're getting along. And the people in Jerusalem are so happy to see these farmers. And they could be different, they could be religious, they could be secular, they could be left, they could be right, but everyone's getting along, and that's the ideal. It's crazy for me even just to say these words. But we're about to approach the second anniversary of October 7th. 2 years, almost, since the massacre of 1,200 innocent Israelis in the south of Israel, the capture of hostages. There are still hostages there. And the truth is, today we face both challenges. We face external challenges from Hamas, from Iran, the Houthis, and we face internal challenges among ourselves, religious and secular, going to the army, judicial reform. Our inability to bridge these gaps, our inability to see the best in each other, even if we disagree, is a threat not only to our morale, it's a threat to our national security. We know openly that our enemies chose the time to attack us at a time when there was internal dissension and division. That has been shown evidently. And so as we read the Parsha this week, and we say these words, Arami Ovid Avi, and we think about the double meaning, we see how relevant it is, both of them, the external enemies that we face and the internal dissension. And we need to pledge, when we read these words, Arami Ovid Avi, we need to pledge that we're going to try harder. We're going to try harder. We are trying, of course, as hard as we can to repel our external enemies, but we're going to have to try harder to heal the dissension within the Jewish people. Hopefully, reading the Parsha this week, learning the portion, reviewing these words, will remind us. For a person who attends a synagogue, attending shul, attending the synagogue is a place of prayer. It's a place of Torah study. It's a place of creating and deepening community. And it's also a place that we express in many different ways. We express the rhythm of our lives, of our Jewish lives, in many, many ways. And one expression of this is the choice every Shabbat morning of the Haftorah. The Haftorah is the passage from the prophets. And every Shabbos, we choose one passage from the prophets to read. And over the summer, there were 3 weeks that the choice that we read was from the prophet Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, and Yeshayahu, Isaiah, and they were prophecies of indictment, of criticism of the Jewish people at that time, leading to the Churban, leading to the destruction of the second temple, of the first temple, leading to Tisha B'Av. And then after that, the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av, we start 7 weeks of Nechama, of consolation. And it started with the words, the famous words of Isaiah, Yeshayahu Hanavi, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Be comforted, my people. And we discussed this once before. God himself promises to comfort us. That's true on a national scale. What's the equivalent for an individual? We use the word Nechama. A person, God forbid, has suffered a terrible loss of someone close to them, maybe a family member. And we talk about Nechama, comfort, consolation. What does that look like? Where does Jewish law and Jewish customs help us arrive? So we have all kinds of practices of mourning for individuals. They parallel, but in an inverse manner, the practices of mourning that lead up to Tisha B'Av. And we have stages. A person sits Shiva, 7 days, and then Shloshim, 30 days, and then 11 months to say Kaddish, 12 months of mourning. So what we find is Jewish law and Jewish tradition guides us through a journey of gradual periods, gradual recovery.
You're sending them off?
I'm sorry?
Sending off the soul.
Well, what I mean is there are gradually there are milestones that should guide us to emotional recovery, leading to a situation where life goes on and a person is able to function in their daily life. Now, I want to share with you something that comes from a very important book. It's written by Rabbi Maurice Lamm, and the title of the book is Consolation. I recommend it to you highly. What we're hoping for is that gradually, stage by stage, step by step, a person comes eventually to have feelings of hopefulness, to be able to plan for the future, a reblossoming of life. Now, of course, every individual goes through this process at different speeds. The stages are just guides, but each person at their own pace. And what that means is that we will always retain the memory of the person that passed away. And there will be occasional emotional times, such as a yahrzeit, or when we say yizkar, that evoke our emotions, or a life cycle event, a wedding, and so Nebuch passed away and is not able to participate. But generally, a person should be able to have those feelings not interfere with life. And going through the practices and the stages of mourning in Jewish tradition help to reach this. But I want to describe this process on a deeper level. The process of mourning that leads to Nechama, consolation or comfort, should be a process of transcendence that leads a person to grow into a new person. Let me describe what I mean. We see this process and we see this word Nechama in the Torah. The Torah says as follows. The Torah says that Sarah died. Sarah was the wife of Abraham, the mother of Yitzchak. Abraham sent his servant Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak, and he found Rivka. Listen to the words carefully. Vayivieha Yitzchak ha'ola Sarah imo. Yitzchak brought Rivka into the tent of his mother, Sarah. Vayikach es Rivka vatila lisha, and Yitzchak married Rivka. Vayehavel, and he loved her. Vayinachem Yitzchak acharei imo, and Yitzchak had Nechama. Yitzchak was consoled after the death of his mother. But I want you to notice something. And our sages point this out. Rabbi Lamm points this out. Vayiviel el oil Rivka, Sarah, simply bringing Rivka into the tent of Sarah, that does not bring about consolation. Because you can't replace a loss. You know, children are crying because their pet died. I'll get you a new dog. It doesn't help. They don't want a new dog. They want this dog. They want this one that they loved. God forbid, God forbid, God forbid, a child dies and someone says, so you'll have another child. Don't ever say that. Because no one wants another child. A parent wants that child. It's a terrible thing to say. Only after Vaye'ehaveh, and he loved her. Only after Yitzchak poured his energy into loving this woman, Rivka, with whom he will fulfill his destiny, only then as a new person is there resolution. Vayinachem, and he was consoled. He was comforted. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, in Psalms, and it's a pasuk that I think every one of us at some point in our lives has thought to say. Keli, Keli, lama azavtani. My God, why have you forsaken me? How many times in our personal lives, Keli, Keli, lama azavtani, why have you forsaken me? On October 7th, lama azavtani, God, why did you forsake the Jewish people on October 7th? In the Holocaust, God, lama azavtani, why did you forsake us? In our lives as individuals and in our national life as the Jewish people. Every one of us asks that question. And here's the problem. Every one of us asks that question because it's normal, it's natural to ask that question, but every one of us gets stuck because the way God has set up this world, we are not given an answer to that question. There is no answer available to us. Why did this happen? Why did the Holocaust happen? And whoever says, I have an answer, I can explain it, they're wrong. So if we ask that question, and we do, and it's natural, but we're going to get stuck because we're not going to get anywhere. Rabbi Shimshon Hirsch says an amazing thing. He reads the letters, the vowels differently. Keli, Keli, my God, lema. Same letters, lamed, mem, he, but instead of lama, why? Lema. For what purpose? To what end? How am I supposed to grow from this loss? That is the question to ask, because then there's an answer. There are things that we can do to grow from a loss. I've told this story before. When my father passed away, I was sitting Shiva. Our family was sitting Shiva in New York, which is where my father lived. And while we were sitting Shiva, one of my oldest friends came to visit. She and I were in school together since kindergarten. We both grew up in Memphis. Our families were close, so we knew each other well. She introduced me to my wife, Marcy.
That's a good friend.
That's a good friend. Her father had died years earlier. So she came to visit me. And she said to me, what mitzvah have you selected by which to honor your father's memory? I was startled. It was the day after my father's funeral. And I told her, how could I think about which mitzvah to do to honor my father? I'm still in shock. It was a surprise. My father was sick, but it was a surprise. He died in his sleep. And she said to me, no, this is the time, right away. Start to think about what mitzvah are you going to take upon yourself in order to honor your father's memory. And of course, she was right. Of course she was right. Because there is an energy in grieving. And like any force, like any energy, it has to go somewhere. So it could go into something negative, depression, anger, loneliness. Or it could be directed, diverted to something positive, constructive. Lema, for what purpose? For what constructive purpose? What am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to do new that I haven't done before? And Shiva is the time to start thinking about that. And the stages, the mourning that we go through is the time to start thinking about that. Because what we want is the energy of the grief and the energy of the pain should be channeled into creating a living memorial, an action, a project. It could be anything constructive. And it's one of the truest lessons I ever learned in my life. And I listened to her. And I did that. I selected something, which I will not share. But it's something that I do every day, and it meant and it means a great deal to me, because every time I do that, every day, it connects me to my Father. Frederik Backman wrote a great novel called The Winners. Don't start with that novel. Start with Beartown. It's a trilogy. I'm telling you, it is among my favorite novels. Frederik Backman, start with Beartown and then The Winners. Read the whole trilogy. But he says in that novel that getting over, I mean, he doesn't say this part, getting over the loss, that's not Nechama. Because that will not happen. You will not get over it. But he writes, in the aftermath of a tragic death, eventually enough time will pass for it to hurt only almost all the time. Hug without crying all the time. Laugh without always feeling guilty. There's another remarkable book. The title is Between Two Kingdoms, a memoir of a life interrupted, written by Suleina Jaouad. Another remarkable book. But she talks about this deep truth that Nechama, true consolation, means growth. Listen to what she says. Healing is figuring out how to coexist with the pain that will always live inside we, without pretending it isn't there or allowing it to hijack your day. Right? That's the balance. Without pretending that it's not there, but not allowing it to hijack your day. Recovery isn't a gentle self-care spree that restores you to a pre-illness state. No. Recovery is not about salvaging the old at all. It's about accepting that you must forsake a familiar self forever in favor of one that is being newly born. It is an act of brute, terrifying discovery. And that discovery is Nechama, true consolation. May it happen to every one of us who suffers a loss. And may it happen soon to all of us, the Jewish people, for the losses we have suffered. This Saturday night, we start Slichos. Slichos are the extra prayers, penitential prayers that we add. We start on Saturday night, but after that, we say them early in the morning, every weekday. We say them on Yom Kippur night, Kol Nidre. And we conclude them at Ne'ilah, the end of Yom Kippur. The structure of these prayers is based on a passage in the Talmud, a remarkable passage in the Talmud. Talmud says as follows. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan teaches, had this not been written explicitly in the Torah, it would be impossible to suggest such a thing. This is when the Jewish people sinned with a golden calf. Such a terrible sin. And Moshe prayed for God to forgive the Jewish people. Melamed shenis atev HaKadosh Baruch Hu k'shliach tzibur. This comes to teach us that God wrapped himself in a talus like a chazan. V'herele l'Moshe seder tefillah, and taught Moshe this prayer. Amar lo, and God said to Moshe, Kol zman she Yisrael chotin, anytime the Jewish people sin. So again, this is not only going to be to achieve forgiveness for the golden calf, this is going to be a methodology, a strategy to be able to be forgiven for any time in the future that the Jewish people sin. Herel el Moshe seder tefillah, God taught Moshe this prayer. Amalo, kol zman she Yisrael chotim, anytime the Jewish people sin, yasu lefanai keseder hazeh, say this prayer before me. Vani mocha lehem, and I will forgive them. And the prayer is known to us as the Yud Gimel Midos, the 13 attributes of God. Hashem, Hashem, Kel, Rachum, V'chanun, 13 attributes of God. So the purpose of Slichos is to make use of what God promised. We're asking for forgiveness. So we're going to use the prayer that God promised is going to work. And so we say over and over and over again, Hashem, Hashem, Kel, Rachum, V'chanun, Erech Hapayim, Rav Chesed Ve'emes, Notzeh Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon, V'fesha, V'chata, V'nakeh. Over and over and over again. And we express this in the paragraph that we say before this. Before we say those lines, we say, Kel Melech Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim Misnaheg Bal Chasidos, God who sits on the throne of mercy, who acts with kindness, pardons the iniquities. Kel, merciful God, Harei Solanu Lomar Shlosh Esrei, you taught us to say the prayer that has 13 attributes. So remember today, God, the promise that you made when we say these 13 attributes, just like you taught Moshe. And then we say them, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'chanun, Erech Hapayim, Rav Chesed Ve'emes, Nosei Chesed La'alafim, Nosei Avon, V'fesha, V'chata, V'nakeh. Now, all of the other paragraphs of Slichos are poems, complicated poems, but they're only leading up to this line, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'chanun. Sfardim begin to say Slichos from the beginning of the month of Elul. Ashkenazim begin from the Saturday night before Rosh Hashanah, but it always must be a minimum of 4 days. This year, Rosh Hashanah is on Tuesday, so it wouldn't be 4 days, so it's the week before. It's this Saturday night. So, no. Oh, that could be, yes. But the reason is because there has to be a minimum number of 4. And we, Ashkenazim, always start on Saturday night. And the first paragraph we say is as follows. B'motza'ei menucha, at the end of our rest, of our Shabbos rest, kedamnucha tchila, we first come before you, God. Hat'az Nechama maron, incline your ear from heaven to listen to us, Yoshev Tehillah, the one who sits to hear the praises of Israel. Lishmoa el harina v'el hatfila, to listen to the song and to listen to our prayer. We start Slichos as Shabbos ends because we want to start it from the position of having been in this 25-hour period of intimacy with God, of closeness with God on Shabbos. Shabbos is a spiritual high. And so we start the Slichos with this high, with this closeness, with this confidence, with this joy. Now, yes, throughout the period that we say Slichos, Rosh Hashanah, up to Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, we have different emotions, lower, higher emotions, until the end of Ne'ilah, the end of Yom Kippur, where we hope that we will end with the same high of intimacy with God with which we started at the end of Shabbos. Hopefully that's where we will end at the end of Ne'ilah. And our prayer must be Rina, it must be song, it must be passionate, it must be vibrant. It must lead us closer to God. And there's one more element of Slichos that I want to share with you tonight. And that is that the Slichos prayers to say Hashem, Hashem, etc., can only be said with a minyan. Only in a congregation. Listen to this from Sivan Rahab Meir. In Jerusalem, they put up a sign because of the crowds that come. When Slichos starts, there are gigantic crowds every night, going on right now, every night, until Yom Kippur. At night, the kotel is jam-packed with people coming to say Slichos. So they have a sign a few blocks away, a traffic sign. And the traffic sign says, avoid arriving by private car for Slichos and use public transportation. Now, that is a very wise piece of advice, because when there are big crowds, it's impossible to park anywhere near the kotel. So stay far away and take public transportation. You'll get there much easier. But Ephraim Oren saw that sign and he understood that there was a deeper message. He said, when we say Slichos, we never arrive as a private individual by ourselves, but as part of the public. We should be spiritually on public transportation, because this is not a private matter. It's a connection to the entire community. This is a national event. And you know, all the parties in the world and all the restaurants in the world and all the dates in the world don't compare to this. No date compares to a date with God. And that is what we are approaching. A date with God. My friends, I wish you a beautiful evening and a lovely Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.